The conversation you're about to watch happened at the Energy Conservatory, and it was an impromptu conversation. It's fast and it's deep, and I want you to be able to follow along with us. So I'm going to give you a few little tidbits before we get started. We need to understand what ZPD means. Zonal Pressure Diagnostics. What does that mean? Easiest way for me to explain it is if I have a home and the home's on a slab and it has a vented attic. I would install a blower door and an exterior door. I would run the blower door on the home, establish the leakage. I would then open the attic stairwell down that is inside the home, and I would run the blower door again. That would let me push more CFM through the attic. There's a lot more to it than that, but what we're trying to figure out during that test is to establish how much of the ceiling is part of the leakage. It gets pretty interesting, and we're going to debate how much it's worth it and how much it may not, from the scientific side to the sales side. Now, if you can hang through that, stay tuned, because Gary Nelson's going to join us and he's going to give us a rundown on how the duct blaster got started. So we're at TEC. It's Friday, last day for all the testing. Genry's in town. Genry wanted to go over ZPD. So we figured we'd get a round table going. So we got Ed from ACA, we got Genry in from Miami, and my man Jake here. If you haven't met Jake yet, Jake's got tons of experience in the building performance side of TEC. Super smart. He's going to be our validator for the most part. So here we go. Genry, kick us off. You want to discuss ZPD? Let's do it.
All right, so zonal pressure diagnostics. So what zonal pressure diagnostics really is, we're trying to establish how the size of one hole with relationship to the other. Just tell me when I'm messed up. All right, so we're trying to see how leaky a zone is. And we're talking about a zone, say a vented attached zone, right? An attic, a crawl space, a basement, a garage. That's normally what it talks about. When we take the concept of ZPD and take it to an interior room, it doesn't hold up, right? Because it's gotta be a zone that is, you're measuring that when you put a hose under interior door to measure CPD in an interior bedroom, all you're doing is measuring the size, the relative size of the hole between that bedroom and the house and that bedroom and the outside. So if a bedroom has, say, 25 pascals of ZPD, that all that means is that the collective hole size between that bedroom and the house is the same size of the collective hole between that bedroom and the outside.
Right, before you go any further,
which it does not infer flow.
What's causing the pressure difference? It's the HVAC equipment, correct?
No, we're talking about a blower
door. Okay, I want to decipher between the two. I'm good.
Okay. Just to clarify for everybody listening who's not used to ZPD, when we say ZPD, we have a blower door running. Okay. We're taking pressures from one zone to another zone with the blower door on.
Right.
Okay. And
on that note,
depressurization,
right?
Which way would you prefer it?
Oh, you can do it either way.
You can do it either way.
Yeah, there's some minor differences, but yeah.
Jared, how would you normally do it?
Depressurization.
Depressurization. Okay, just to establish a baseline of where we're going.
Right. So here's the thing. Does that mean, which is what I wanted to get to, does that mean that running a hose under an interior door, it's pointless, or is it wrong, or you're wasting your time? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if that helps, if that aids as a sales tool, okay, to help in your presentation of why a house or a given bedroom is problematic, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I'm on board. But I can say that as long as it's not misrepresented is the only item that I would like to mention.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges from the way I've heard people describe that test is when you shut that door, you're changing the path, the leakage path. Yes. And what you don't understand is there's an assumption, I think, that change is between the room and the outside, but what you're not getting is between that room and the other adjacent rooms.
Exactly.
It's actually not a leak.
So to have interior rooms ZPD have real any kind of technical meaning, you have to isolate that room from the rest of the house completely.
Right.
And that is both realistically, and realistically, that's just a waste of time, right? And you probably won't be able to accomplish it either way.
Okay, note taken. So, Jake, I guess I'd ask you a question to follow up on that. Total waste of time to go into interior bedroom? I
haven't used it. I don't, and I'm not trying to say that as no value.
No.
I think if you're trying to say this room has this much leakage, that I don't think you get there with that test.
Okay, I agree with that, and before I go any further, I want to, this, and Ed knows this, but we just met. I think that the value of ZPD is it can be very, very high, and is completely and wildly misused. So we agree on that. Yeah. Now, the ZPD to interior rooms. So the where it comes up short is when it's misrepresented in the sense of saying like your room is 50% connected to outside, so you got 25 pascals. Yeah. We both know that's wrong, right? Or if he says that you have 12 pascals, it's 24% connected to outside. That is also wrong. But all this testing, you still got to sell it, right? And if you can communicate to the client, the one that's going to write the checks, that your room is leaking when it shouldn't be, you can say something like, instead of saying that your room is connected to outside, you can use a way around it, like saying, for example, so I have a blower door. This blower door is keeping your house at minus 50 pascals with relationship to outside. What that means is your house is 0, your house is minus 50, outside it's 0, right? That's what that means. So if I go to this bedroom from in the inside of the house, there shouldn't be any difference between the hallway or the central area where you're at and this bedroom. If I get a pressure reading, then that means there's air coming in from where it shouldn't be, right?
I think there could be a scenario where your interior walls are extremely tight, and shutting that door could change that number, and that might not be exactly what you're trying to explain there.
Okay.
I mean, I've not heard, and I'm by far not the expert on this. I need to say that up front.
That's Colin, but Colin's on vacation because he built up like 100 days. So
there's some big guns on this topic, and I'm not one of them. I'm not going to pretend to be. I haven't seen that room to room use, but I'm coming more from the building analysis side, and not from a point where I'm trying to communicate that to a homeowner. Specifically with the blower door, like dominant duct leakage, when you turn the air handler on and get a room pressure, that sort of stuff. That's. I think there's a lot more you could talk about there, but that's kind of a different topic.
Let's get into one of your examples. You said you had a good example of using it in the field, right?
So what I've seen is people dealing with the attic, and what's different from your scenario is that it's all outside on one side and all inside on the other, and we're opening an attic hatch. So we're taking 2 readings. And in that case, that's where the zone pressure, I think, kind of can dial in, and you can start to infer much more about leakage at that point. So just the pressure by itself, exactly like you said, it's the ratio of holes. Mm-hmm. So the way I've always described it to folks is, and Rick Karg and others do a great job of training on this, so I could still kind of screw this up, but it's a ratio of holes. Doesn't matter how big the hole is. So if you had for us, let's say a Rambler house is at negative 50. You've got an attic, and that attic is completely sealed to the outside. There's not one leak to the outside, and there's not one leak to the inside. I can go and poke a hole between the house and the attic, and then come up in the attic and poke that same size hole to the outside
and get 25
and show 25. And I can say, wow, that is is 25. That is half connect. That's halfway to the outside. I can then take a knife and cut a hole that's 3 feet wide, go up to the attic, to outside, cut that same size hole, get that same number 25. So exactly like you said, it's just if those holes are the same size versus different. So that's where doing zone pressure diagnostics, where you open a hole, that and do another blower door and have 2 pressures with 2 blower door numbers and 2 pressures, you can now get that next level of saying, okay, the leakage between this zone and that zone is this, plus or minus, and between that hole and the outside, plus or minus. And now, to me, you're getting into a spot where you can have a conversation.
And you can go to RedCalc, right?
Absolutely.
You can go to RedCalc, and this should be said if somebody wants to test this theory. You can go to RedCalc. RedCalc has a form that you can fill out. I think Colin wrote a lot of the math for the ZPD test in there.
Yep.
Where you can go in and you can enter your 2 CFM numbers.
Yep.
You can enter your 2 pressure readings from house to zone.
Yep.
And, it'll do the calculations, but it'll give you a percentage of error, right? So the more leakage you have in the attic to outside, if I'm saying that right, I'm not the most expert here, but the leakage to outside, if it's significantly high, then you don't have that controlled room.
So
connected outside, it's a bad.
But before we get into that, so there is I feel like I come from the field, and I come from selling these jobs and selling this testing, right? Where I actually have to get in front of the clients and being able to present this to them in a way that they are willing to break out the checkbooks to make things better. It's not. I'm all in for being technically right. I'm technically 100% sound, right? And so I think there is very little doubt of that. But if the whole interior room ZPD, if we can establish a relationship between that and the client, the person that pays the bills, understanding that they have an issue that can be fixed through A, B, C, or whatever X, Y, Z, path that they want to take there. If that helps me communicate that, I'm not gonna say that the room is 40% connected to outside or 30%. It's that I wouldn't do that. But if it helps me illustrate that, look, the exterior it's at 50, right? This room it's at 20. What does that mean? That you got leakage in the room, right? There's no need to infer that 20 means that 40% or 20% or this much air from that much air. There's no need to get into that because that's going to be way off no matter how you cut it. But if it helps communicate that, it's not exactly, in a way, it's a dog and pony show. But if the end result is going to be that the customer might be willing to buy into home improvements, and it might be willing to pay for the testing that you're doing.
The one challenge I would say is that you're saying that there's leaks. Some of those leaks are the ductwork. They're intentional. So that would, for me, that's the tough part to twist apart there. So yeah, I will just challenge you on it. Just that I think it's tough to base it in objective facts that when we do this test, that leakage means that you need to fix something because there's holes there. I think they're supposed to be.
That's a good point. So I
up to the bedroom, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Not attic.
Not right. We're talking about interior.
So it's useful.
As you know,
it's not useful.
as you know, like I connected with Colin on this a little while ago, and I took the time to write a very humble 3-part series.
It was good. I read that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was good.
So if you know how I advocate for taping up the ducts to do these things, right? If you're gonna do it at all. So it has gotten to a point where, like ZPD to interior rooms, if it helps selling the job, fine, you can do it. But in reality, like for example, I myself don't do it. If I'm gonna inspect a room, I use a thermal camera, and my ZPD it's only to the attic. Where in reality, I've actually even refrained from calculating the leakage. I only I do the ZPD to the attic. If I get if the attic is well vented and I get a ZPD reading of 48, I don't have a problem, right? Because there's a considerable collective hole size between the attic and the house. Right?
If you know the outside, if you know the attic goes to the outside, right. And because now you know more about the size of the hole.
Because because I mean that can be fairly established just by looking at the soffits and even going into the attic and see how much light you can see from up there and things like that.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Genry, when you do your tests in the field, is it common for you to go to the attic and tape off the ventilation to get pressure in the attic to run the tests?
No.
But wouldn't that bring down your uncertainty in RedCalc?
But that's the thing, though. I don't use the RedCalc for that. Like I used it.
What do you use?
Okay, I just established that if I have enough ventilation around the soffits, and I have a ZPD reading of, I don't know, let's use round number, say 45. If I have a continuous soffit vent and I have a 45 ZPD reading on the attic, I know that house is a mess, right?
I think it's reasonable. You can make some inferences. You can infer. Yeah, I got a big. It's the same thing. If you know that it's a ratio,
But you don't know
size
the
of
leakage at that point.
No,
You're
but
just saying there's a percentage, we're dealing with a ratio. But if you were to go into RedCalc and do that same thing with a known hole, you would get
yeah, I
a
mean,
CFM number. You would get ceiling leakage.
you will get a CFM leakage, and that's fine, and I've done it, and I'm not advocating against that. But that it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what kind of client you're dealing with. Because if that's time that you can invest in another section of that project where it will sell the job on the improvements, or it will sell the customer on duct improvements or shell improvements or HVAC improvements, I'd rather spend it there.
and one thing I could add there is like when this house that we did recently, we did a positive pressure blower.
Okay.
We knew we were going to take the hatch off and do the open a hole method. We didn't want to suck any insulation out, so we actually did pressurize because of that. So if there's nasty stuff in the attic, sometimes the older types of insulation can have some hazards. So pressurizing, not a horrible idea sometimes. Pressurized the house, did our blower, did the same thing you did, put a hose up to the attic, right? At that point, we are like 60% done with doing a full zone pressure, because all we did is got our reading, stopped, and then took the hatch out, had the same pressure hose, turned the blower back on. Then we were done. So I mean, it's that much.
Exactly.
It's that much more work. And the other nice thing is when you're pressurizing, if you're talking from a sales perspective, and you have a fog puffer, when you're pressurizing out, squirting around a leak and watching that go in and kind of make the invisible visible in a pressurization test can be nice for a homeowner to actually see, like, oh wow, there's that leak right there. So I totally get what you're talking about. There's this huge divide between the geeks who want to figure out the science and make the tools so that it works really well, and then talking to a normal human being.
But it doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be a divide, right? So, like, if I can go into RedCalc and figure it out and tell you your attic is leaking this much, right?
We get a number.
If you do that enough, then you begin to see a pattern between the type of ventilation that you have for the attic and the CPD reading that you get from the attic. Do you follow what I'm saying? Okay. So what that means is once you do the add a hole or add a flow method enough, you begin to see a relationship of how leaky with the margin of error that you're going to get, and a ceiling plane can be, right? So at that point,
So you're saying you could generalize ceiling leakage based on ratio?
you can generalize ceiling leakage on how much of a problem that may be, and then you can focus, instead of doing internal room CPDs, you can do it with a thermal camera. You see what I'm saying?
We'll put Ed on the spot. Ed, you're coming into this kind of like, ZPD is not quite your thing, right?
No,
So-
I'm familiar,
But you're
not intimate like these fellas, but go
you're
ahead.
very intelligent, right? But ZPD is
argue
not.
that one,
So I wanted your me and Genry, we've had a lot of discussions. Me and Jake, we've had a lot of discussions. But I wanted like a neutral party that could like cue in and say, if we're going that deep, where do you see that going from a perspective of, from where you're coming from?
I think anybody that's using a blower door to analyze a house, it would be in their best interest to at least have somewhat of an understanding of these zonal tests that can be done. And I think it would be really good if some people that are intimate with it could start to set some, I don't know if guidance is the right word, but set something up so when the person who isn't as intimate with it could make the conscious decision, it's worth my time to do this now, or it's not worth my time. And there's some stuff that I was listening to you guys say that I understand exactly what you're speaking about. There was stuff that you guys were saying that I'm still kind of lost. For instance, when you said something about an interior bedroom, does it have an exterior wall?
Yes.
Okay. Does it make a difference if there's 2 exterior walls?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, what do you think?
It's just,
If it's got a wall to the inside, it's gonna, you know what I mean? That's all it takes.
And you can't split the ratio
Right.
between outside
Exactly.
leakage
That's
and
all it
interior
is.
leakage.
So like everything else we do, what's the common denominator with all this?
Okay,
It's
so
math, right?
right.
And either we can apply a good math problem, or we're going to apply a math problem that has so many different variables in it. At the end of the day, is it worthwhile? That's what I'm hearing.
and the big challenge, so the example that you were mentioning before that I have is I worked for years in the weatherization assistance program. It's a federal program, but they do 4-hour audit on every house. I mean, data on top of it. They do a full energy modeling. They do, a manual J. It's not an ACA. Some do a full ACA. Some do a kind of a partial.
Yeah.
Blower testing, zones, part of it, every zone. So
every zone gets the hole out of hole and all that. Wow.
if they can, I mean, that's kind of each state decides. Some states, man, I've looked at their test protocol.
Other people's money.
OPM, man. Everybody's down with
How long
OPM.
does it normally take, Jake?
The
So
zones.
they'll do the zonal, say, on a house with a crawl and an attic and a garage.
Like the method I described, where you're already gonna do the blower door and you're already gonna get a pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Adding the hole really, it doesn't add a ton of time because the main thing is the setup. If you're already gonna do a blower door, taking the second to do the zone pressure and open a hole, you're already 60.
And you do it using the RedCalc app, not what Colin wrote.
There's like Colin has an old spreadsheet. There's a ton of different ways to do it, but I think a lot of people do use RedCalc because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Karg does a lot of training on it. Rick Karg does great trainings on this, so I definitely recommend.
I'm going to go ahead and say I did a few back home because I'm building a case study for TEC, and I will say maximum 10 minutes to get the ceiling leakage number. Here's the problem: if my leakage to outside from the attic is really high, the problem with that is my number may not be really good because my error factor in RedCalc could be really high.
Right.
So, and I haven't quite fully understood beyond that because Gary Nelson and me were on the phone. He was guiding me through some stuff while I was there trying to tape off the leakage to outside so I could get the percentage of error down.
So that's what burns your time.
Yes.
Yeah, that was very time consuming.
Right. So the thing that I learned in this program is they were using zones as a quality control. They're going to go in and audit the house. They're going to pay somebody to go in and fix it. And then for that program, the rule is you got to come back in and test. Did the blower door drop? Did the HVAC system get installed? What's the combustion analysis? Is it set up right? There's a lot of test in, test out. And so they were using it specifically to set a benchmark. And then folks are coming back in and later and getting judged on how that changed. Problem was, we don't know a ton about how the test was conducted. Was it windy on that day? Did the person reference the inside or the outside? You could set it up 2 different ways. And things change. The hole's to the outside. If that changes, well, that changes the whole. Now you can't compare the final to the front. So there was a ton. We blew insulation. We didn't necessarily plug vents, but we added chutes and put insulation in. Now that net-free area along the outside of that hip roof is changed by some amount. Oh, we actually did put in a ridge vent. So there was a lot going on where folks were not understanding wind changing the outside plane, and we're using it and saying, oh, wow, and understanding that there's an error. You got a range, and you get an answer, but you get a bar. Your answer could be anywhere in that bar. So it is totally possible to have someone go in and do work and seal things up and have it get a little bit worse because bars overlap. So when people use it as a boom, it was here and now it's not where I want it to be, you failed. Or you did a great job. It doesn't, unless you kind of tighten that up process-wise, I don't think it can be used in that way. So, but that's different than what you're talking about. That was a QA type of thing.
No, but so
Jake just went there.
Like I've been, yeah, so I feel like I've been through most of the spectrum on, at least in the CPD part. I went through YouTube University. I
Wait,
graduated with honors.
Well, he started with SpongeBob University.
That was
He's
first.
upgraded to YouTube University.
That's how I became bilingual.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Or Boss Lightyear. So I went through YouTube University. Somehow I thought that I had figured it out. Went to the field, started, putting things out there. Thankfully, I met people, Steve, that told me, that raised a red flag. So that's not quite how that works. So him and Colin instigated enough doubt in my mind where I needed to look into it. So I did look into it. I did add a hole. I did add a flow. I went through all of that. I wrote about it a little bit. And I did it enough. I feel that unless there is a specific case that I'm required to know the leakage contribution from the ceiling alone, it doesn't merit having to play with the pressures. It doesn't merit taking the time to having to play with the pressures or having to plug outside air vents and things like that. If I can establish a certain part of the pattern of outside air of attic ventilation, soffit vents, ridge vents, whatever that may be, and I get my CPD reading and I see that it's low, I know it's a problem. Because now I have an idea of the size of the hole, right? And if I have an idea of the size of the hole, I just got to work on closing that hole a little more. Because you're not going to change the attic ventilation. You're going to change, the only thing that really, the best case scenario there is that the attic gets encapsulated. And if the attic gets encapsulated, now you can test out. And it better work. You know what I'm saying? But those things can be tested out.
Yeah. A place where I've seen it work well is when you have multiple zones. And really the question is, again, this is coming from the perspective of we've already decided to do work. We're going to do work. So it's kind of past some of the things you're talking about as far as the sale. And it's about, are we going to get this right? Are we going to get as much as air sealing as we can? And are we doing it in a way that's not going to waste time? So the situation I hear about weatherization is we've got multiple attics. You can use zone pressure in that case to say, you know what, I think, this second house we went to, it just had an attached garage and an attic. You could probably guess which one's leakier. Mm-hmm. Doing a zone pressure, it was like, wow, we're not going to spend hardly any time trying to seal from the garage because we got a huge amount of leakage to the attic. So let's go there. That's not the best example, but multiple zones, a crawl space, some side attics. I can see some use there if your time is precious and you don't have a ton of it. Where are you going to go to get the best bang for your buck? That's where I've seen it actually work the best. Because that you kind of get surprised there. And that's typically going to be in older houses with a bunch of crazy, attics hooked onto them. If you've got a rambler, you know where the leaks are. Like you're saying, get up in the attic. And
I got to know what a rambler is.
I think RedCalc is the definition of a rambler. Let me guess first. A rancher?
It's a rambler. Sorry. Yeah, it's a one-story house. Yeah, one story.
And it has a roof.
It's got a roof.
See, we have a ranch with a roof in my part.
Oh, sorry.
Let me ask you this. We could go on forever, but I would like to have people who are listening to this, who are going to watch this, to know two things. First, Colin Olson, right?
Absolutely.
He's our physicist. Oh, yeah. Man, that dude is smart.
The buck stops there.
If it comes, the buck stops there. You got a ZPD question and Colin can't answer it, I don't think anybody's going to answer it. Fair enough?
Really good.
So if you got any questions, you can call TEC. Maybe we can get you in touch with Colin. He's a busy guy. Maybe not, right? I can't make promises there. But what I really want to do is say, what's worth it, what's not worth it, in very short, simplistic terms. And it sounds like what we're saying is ZPD, main living to a bedroom, not worth it. Okay. Fair enough.
I can agree with that.
Would you agree, Jake? Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say there's just a lot of unknowns there.
Okay, but what about if that's going to help sell the job? Would that make it worth it?
Well, that's a good point of view. I'm trying to take it more from just a scientific point of view.
Okay, scientific type of point of view, not worth it.
Not worth it.
Hands down, it's a dog and pony show.
Dog and pony show.
But if you can use it to present to your customer, to help to aid. If somehow you weren't able to establish through the use of a thermal camera that this room has an issue, you can say, here, let me put it to you a different way. Walk up here. You bring him to the gauge. And look, your house is minus 50 with relationship to outside. House, minus 50. Outside, 0. When you check to the other room, it has to, when you check to the room, it has to be 0. If it's not 0, then you have air coming in from somewhere else that is not inside the house.
I'm with you. So let's go on to the second thing I'd like to establish. House to attic. Valuable or not valuable?
1,000,000,000% valuable. That is the single most valuable one.
Right?
Yes.
Here's the one, because I have not done with crawl. I don't have an experience with crawl spaces.
The problem with the crawl I do. The problem with crawl spaces is it's
before we get there.
Okay.
Valuable or not valuable?
Yes. The problem with the crawl spaces.
Yeah, okay,
absolutely.
okay.
The problem with the crawl spaces is that you cannot compare apples to apples with the attic because the ventilation pattern of a crawl space might not be the same as an attic.
And when we say crawl space, we mean closed crawl space or vented crawl space?
You're going to get all types.
I mean,
is there a difference between worth it or not worth it, or always worth it in the crawl, whether it's, you know?
Okay, let me put it to you a different way. If you have a vented zone, I'm gonna make one exception, and I'm gonna let Jake, beat me down for that. If you have an attached zone that has a surface that is shared with the inside of the house, be that a floor or a ceiling or a wall from a garage, that room has to get a ZPD rating. That's how I see it. Now, if the garage shares the same attic with the rest of the house, now that leakage might be bypassing. Are you with me here? Right.
It's the point I was making about the interior.
Right.
It gets really tough with connected zones. In the interior zone, your situation is a lot of connections.
Exactly.
You're chasing things where I don't think those numbers mean something. So to use it as a sales technique, that's you. Personally, the thing that I thought worked for me really well.
From a scientific point of view.
There's challenges. And
it's garbage is what it is. I mean, let's call it what it is. But it's garbage from a scientific point of view. But is it 1,000% worthless?
Yeah.
If it's gonna put money on the table. If this house gets fixed as a result of you doing that.
And the one thing that I would add on that point is that that same room with the blower door on, a technique I've seen people use. Like I've already mentioned smoke. The visual, I think, is a valuable sales tool. Showing somebody and they can see it go into the hole. They're like, oh, geez. And their perception, people's perception of comfort in a room. I've also seen just the technique of shutting the door with the blower door on and cracking it open and feeling the gust. Like that is another technique that gives people a tactile, like, oh, wow, there's a leak there. So when I've tried to talk to people and show them numbers, man, I can get people's eyes to glaze over so fast.
My point exactly. So there's a disconnect before going all in on the scientific side and going all in the YouTube University side.
Yeah.
But there doesn't mean there can be something in the middle.
Absolutely.
That has to work. Because in the end, for all these things to work, for gauges to sell, for blower doors to sell, for things to sell, people got to pay for it. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good note to close that one, man, because this got really deep.
Steve's going to say something.
Yeah, Steve, you just want. So Steve Rogers has just joined us. He's not on the camera, but he's here.
Just want to what you want for lunch.
Moved like 150 CFM or so, 6-inch or 8-inch. I think it was an 8-inch.
That's what's on the table back there right now that I brought with me.
I've got the actual one upstairs, and I sent that out to 3 different people, and within like 2 weeks, everybody had called me and said, "There's something wrong with this." I install it on a building, I'm measuring the pressure in the duct, and I turn the thing on, and the pressure in the duct doesn't go above like 2 pascals. what's wrong? I mean, I'm blowing air in the ducts, and I seal all the ducts off, I attach this fan, I turn it on, and there's no pressure. And I figured out, oh, these ducts are really...
You gotta get a bigger fan.
150 CFM fan is not big enough to do a duct leakage test on the houses that they were testing. One of them was testing mobile homes, I believe, and the other one was testing houses in Florida with ducts and attics near Orlando, I think. But then we decided, well, we needed to get some more measurements, and we decided we needed at least 1,000 CFM of flow to test ducts if they're going to be leaky. And once we had a 1,500 CFM duct blaster, we went out to 8 randomly selected brand new houses in Minnesota and did duct leakage testing. Total duct leakage, not leakage to outside, because all our ducts, basically, in most houses, all our ducts are inside, mostly in the basement. But we found in every single house, we could not get the ducts up to 50 pascals.
Is that what you were saying?
I think we did get them, no, this was 1,500 CFM.
Oh, wow.
In every case, the leakage of the ducts at 25 pascals was larger than the rated air handler flow. Which tells you
The static pressure was very low.
the supply plenum and the return plenum are not at 0.2 of an inch water. They're way less.
Was it mostly wall cavities to blame, or?
Oh, it's bent floor joists and open wall cavities. And